Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm here. We have a special guest. She's from the Young Turks politics. She's also, you know her from her work with the Unity Reform Commission, the Democratic Unity Reform Commission. You've probably seen her plenty of times on this show, too. It's Nomiki Konst, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, Nomi.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
So glad to have you on the show. Now, I want you to tell everybody about all the great work that you've been doing with the Unity Reform Commission. You were appointed by Bernie Sanders, correct, to be on that commission?
That is correct. He named his people in the fall of last year, and after the DNC race a couple of months later, all of the other commissioners were announced, and we went to business.
So now what is the point of the Reform Committee?
I am so happy you call it that Reform Commission, because a lot of people leave that reform part out and call it the Unity Commission, like we're supposed to sit around, the 21 of us, and sing Kumbaya and talk about how the Democrats are great. The point is, you know, the commission came out of the convention, and it was an agreement between Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders on how to move forward. And the point of the commission, and we've had these commissions in the past. Anybody who's read Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank knows it starts off with talking about the McGovern Commission and the Hunt Commission, and that's how we got, you know, we prioritize professionals instead of union members, and that's why we have super delegates. Well, now this commission is set with reforming the primary process, making it more inclusive, more open, more reflective of the 21st century, and reforming the Democratic Party institutionally.
Now, Nomiki, Nomi, now for the people who haven't read Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank, I have, you have. So in 1968, the Democratic Party had a convention in Chicago, and it was ugly. And so they decided to reform it to try to give power back to the people who got to pick the nominee. Now, George McGovern was the head of that commission. So I don't know how that they say that commission gave more power back to the people, but isn't that the same commission that came up with super delegates?
You know, I think the superdelegates really came out of the Hunt Commission, which was a couple of years later. It was a hyper reaction to the McGovern Commission.
Oh.
What the McGovern Commission did, and this is like, we're like getting into like super weeds right now, and I'm by no means an expert on like the history of, I'm not a political science, you know, historian, but I've read a little bit about it in preparation for this. And the McGovern Commission, they wanted it to be more about like the professional class that was coming, and as a result they exchanged, like, I don't want to say it this way, but they put in all these quotas which were really good for the Democratic Party, but then they forgot one group, which is, you know, labor, and labor is the bedrock of the Democratic Party. And you see these fights that are you know, occurring today between, you know, the identity politics Democrats and the labor Democrats, and they're being pitted against each other, and it's almost a manufactured argument, when really it should be about the professional class of Democrats against the labor Democrats, because labor Democrats are people of color. They are women. They are immigrants. And so this all kind of emerged out of this manufactured argument at the McGovern Commission, which really just left out labor. Okay, so now,
just I always want people to know that there's been attempts to reform the Democratic National Committee before. So there was two. So there's McGovern, and then they got a little afraid that too much power went to the people, so they took it back and they put in super delegates. Now here we are again, after everyone admits that the Democratic National Committee put their thumb on the scale for Hillary Clinton and disadvantaged Bernie Sanders. So now we have another one of these. It's called the Unity Reform Commission, and they were both appointed by Bernie and by Hillary's people. You're on it. And what has the work that's been going on? Tell us what's been going on. You had a meeting in Chicago and some other ones. Tell us about it.
So we spend the year meeting, and we are examining what our vice chair calls buckets. So the buckets are essentially, we're examining the primary and caucus process, superdelegates, and party reform. And party reform is like some of the structural stuff within the party, you know, budgets and, you know, committees. And this is an area I'm super obsessed with because I'm on that internal committee within the commission. Now we met in Chicago and we discussed caucuses and state parties, which falls under party reform. And that is part of the reason why this whole debate started. Was we've been listening to like what I would say is testimony. So the commission members are listening to the testimony from experts on these areas, from different opinions, different states, have different experiences, because the goal is that we are here to reform the caucus process, reform the primary process, obviously reform state parties and how they're being assisted right now.
So that you had people come in and when you say give testimony, just kind of talk about the different ways caucuses work or their own personal experiences and knowledgeable people of how caucuses could work and the way you could change them. So you've been hearing testimony and something. And so now people are trying to slam you because you tell me what happened. People are trying to misrepresent your opinions. Go ahead.
This is intentional. So, this is a very sophisticated rhetorical skill that is being used against the left right now. So nobody on the commission, let's just make this very clear, nobody on the commission is doing this. This is coming from individuals outside of the commission. I would say some of the biggest, most well-known people that are doing this are Neera Tanden from Center for American Progress, who was a chief aide to Hillary Clinton, worked in the Clinton White House in the past. Then you have Joy Reid from MSNBC, Joan Walsh from The Nation. It's this cabal that kind of parrots each other. And none of them watched the Unity Reform Commission. And so what they did, I was sitting there at the commission and I was listening to experts on caucuses. People who've run caucuses in Iowa, Washington, Nevada, very different experiences, not perfect, but some of them have made incredible reforms. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to learn what those reforms would be to make the caucus process better. But nobody sat there and listened to the commission, and they all had opinions on caucuses. And so when I was reporting, I was literally, I'm not saying from a reporter's capacity, I was just tweeting out what they were explaining to us, like, certain things about caucuses. And this guy who writes for Daily Kos, Armando something or other, writes a piece saying that I have this motive, this strategy to replace primaries with caucuses, which, number one, we can't do. Number two, I have not said anywhere. And as a result, Neera Tanden starts to tweet that article out. And this guy from Share Blue, Matthew Chapman, sends out a call to have Tom Perez, the DNC chair, remove me from the commission, which also he cannot do. And my they have these Reddit pages too.
So let's remind people who Neera Tanden is. Neera Tanden, she's the head of the Center for American Progress, which is a corporate think tank, which used to be run by Podesta. She was so she's in bed with John Podesta, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. Neera also consulted on the Hillary Clinton campaign, and she probably would have had a job inside the White House if Hillary Clinton got elected. She didn't. Now she hates Bernie Sanders and anybody who has anything to do with them, and she will do the most underhanded, disingenuous, slimy attacks on people who stand up against a corporatist inside the Democratic Party. Now, you happen to be at the receiving end of one of Neera Tanden's smears, and this is what you're talking about.
Yeah, we've had a history of debate on Twitter. Probably starts with my questioning some of the funding sources of CAP's. CAP has accepted money from UAE. There's a lot of questionable,
so you're talking about her Center for American Progress. Her think tank took money from the United Arab Emirates, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and many others. I mean, The Intercept has done incredible work on this. It's not hard. Politico reported on it like 2 years ago about their questionable funding because they claim to be progressive. And let's not just, the importance of CAP, why CAP has such a significant role is that they influence Democratic Party members. The policy. She was on the platform committee. She was advising the platform committee. I was on the platform committee. We saw what was going on. So this is a battle over the ethics, the morals, what the Democratic Party is supposed to represent, the issues. I mean, this is our platform committee on their side. They literally had a fracking lobbyist debating fracking with Bill McKibben and Josh Fox. And it's only one person there actually had a vested interest in this, who had a conflict of interest, and that was the fracking lobbyist. So, a lot of the stuff they just assumed nobody was paying attention to, and now people are really paying attention to it, and they're not happy. So what she does, because she can't win on the facts, and they can't win on policy, they smear. And they said caucuses are racist. And anybody who supports caucuses are racist. Well, Hillary Clinton won caucuses. We wouldn't have had Barack Obama our president if he didn't win caucuses. Jesse Jackson wouldn't, have moved so far if it weren't for caucuses. Caucuses represent every single precinct, every single corner. I learned this on the commission. I didn't know this. Every single corner of a state. It is literally a representative democracy. Whereas a primary, it's just based on who's going to turn out. So, I think that a lot of their stuff is being debunked. Superdelegates are majority white and male, so that's, they don't represent people of color better. They represent elected officials and party insiders better. And same thing with primaries.
So they're coming at you by saying so they don't like you because you represent the non-corporate wing of the Democratic Party on the Unity Reform Commission, and so now they're going to smear you and they're going to say that you are supporting caucuses over primaries and that hurts people of color and you're anti-people of color. That's what's happening, right?
Right, and none of that is true. I don't support caucuses over primaries. It's not one or the other. I want to reform both of them. I want both of these processes to be more inclusive. I would say most people, including Hillary folks on this commission, would agree. Even Emmy Ruiz, who ran the Nevada caucus for Hillary Clinton, said in her statement, and I quoted her on Twitter, she said that she loves caucuses, but they need reform. And when I quoted her, her own people went after her like they didn't know who she was. And that's why I'm a little skeptical of this whole thing, because how on earth do they know who I am, but not know who Emmy Ruiz is, who runs Onward Together, by the way, who is in favor of caucuses? So it makes me feel like this is a little bit more coordinated. There's a track record, there's a history, there's some patterns of this type of coordination in the past. And it's like suddenly, these people are dormant on the internet, and then poof, they wake up and there's like 35,000 tweets calling me a racist.
So they've been instigating an online harassment of you is what's been happening. And people have been harassing you online because of this bullshit attack that you are anti-people of color. You know what I love is there was that article in Mike that quoted you, and it was about Kamala Harris, Deval Patrick, and I think it was about Cory Booker, and it was about corporate Democrats. And your quote was, I'll paraphrase. You go ahead. What was your quote in that article?
It was that article specifically was about Kamala Harris, and then there was another one that spun off of it. But they asked me, what do you think about Kamala Harris and her 2020 ambitions? And I said, and this is just a couple of days after her own co-senator, Senator Feinstein, said that Kamala Harris needs to have a little bit more experience in the Senate before we talk about those things. But I said, essentially, anybody who's interested in being the presidential nominee in 2020 needs to pay attention to economics. Income inequality is worse than it's ever been. So anybody who's aligned with Wall Street should, disassociate themselves from Wall Street, or something along the lines of that. You can find the quote, but that's basically what I said.
And so I was watching MSNBC, and Joyanne Reid talked about that article, and she made it sound like, first of all, she said, why didn't they ask the opinion of any millennials or people of color? You are a millennial.
I'm a millennial. So little-known fact, yeah.
So well-known fact. And then they made it sound like anybody who stands up against Kamala Harris for her corporatism is a racist. And seems to be the new thing of the corporatists now. So now they're trying to usurp. So what that is again, more crying wolf. This happened during the primary, and I tried to explain to Joan Walsh, which she is impenetrable to logical, accurate information, Joan Walsh. I tried to explain to her that when you call someone like Bernie Sanders, a guy who has a 45-year record for standing up for the disenfranchised and minorities and for women and people of color, if you attack him as being sexist and racist, when a real sexist and racist comes along, now it's not going to mean anything when you call him that. So that's the old boy who cried wolf, and they don't care. They're doing that. They call you a racist. They call Bernie Sanders a sexist. They call me a sexist and a racist. That's just what they do. These people are empty shells of human beings, and somehow they consider themselves on the left. There's nothing left about Neera Tanden or the Center for American Progress or Joan Walsh or Joy-Ann Reid. Those are corporatists with absolutely no integrity, none. Those are people who just want money and they want to be on the winning side, and they don't want to debate policy with you. All they want to do is smear you. I've seen it happen to me. I've seen it happen to Cenk Uygur. I see it happening to you right now. They did it to Bernie Sanders. They smeared. These are the people who smear Bernie Sanders.
And it doesn't work. I think, in terms of their strategy, if I'm going to put on my little strategist hat for a second, Bernie Sanders is only becoming he's more popular with the African-American communities right now than with white communities, which is something they're freaking out about. So every single time one of these polls comes out, they look for whatever they can to, I am to them low-hanging fruit right now because I'm on the commission. When they go after other commission members like Jim Zogby, who has been, has been a leader. He was on the Jesse Jackson campaign. He was an advisor to Senator Obama at the time, and then President Obama. This is a man who's been in the party for a very long time, in executive committee membership. When they go after him, they say things like, "With all due respect, Mr. Zogby." When they go after me, they go, "You racist, you horrible human being." Finally, what happened was that wasn't working. And so I've noticed that the debate is no longer "you're racist," because so many people came out and were defending me. Now they're saying all she wants to do is, ready for this, rig the primary for Bernie Sanders in 2020.
Rig the primary. They sound like Trump. They sound like Trump, right? I'm sorry, say again?
I said if only I had that power. First off, the commission is made up of more Hillary and Tom Perez supporters than it is with. We have 7 people. They have 12, I believe. 13. No, 12. Yeah, so it's totally ridiculous. My belief is that there's 2 things happening here. Neera Tanden and her little group, and I don't know if it's super PACs or other organizations. It's very unclear at this point. Their goal is to try to keep their most ardent supporters engaged and angry. And they'll feed them as much misinformation as possible to keep that. There's also a business that's attached to that, so they need to sustain themselves. Then the other goal is, and I'm really concerned about this, because the people on the commission are doing really good work. I don't know where it's going to lead in the long run, but we are actually working through a lot of stuff, and I'm surprised by some of the progress and where we see eye to eye. My concern is that these outside people are sabotaging a commission in which we're trying to save the Democratic Party. Let's just be really clear here. This is what this is about, saving the Democratic Party. And if the Neera Tandens of the world are willing to sabotage it after 1,100 seats are lost, you might as well just hand the Democratic Party over to the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, they would, and they don't have a problem doing that. In fact, they turned it over to the same donors who'd run the Republican Party, and Shama Shawant, who said on my show months ago that the corporate Democrats would rather lose to a Republican than win with a progressive. I thought she was being hyperbolic when she said that, but that is 100% true.
Mm-hmm. And they're in the business of it. I mean, they knew in 2010, after we got a shellacking, that they needed to do something about investing in state parties. Did they? No. People, state party chairs have been complaining about not getting funding for a very long time. They don't release their budget. They don't debate the budget. It's not even that it's supposed to be, whether it's public or not. They're not sharing the budget of the Democratic Party as any corporation would with its board, its executive members. So nobody knows where all this money that they were raising is going. And now they complain that they're bankrupt. Well, where'd you spend it? Where'd you spend it?
Hey, everybody, we have 2 live Jimmy Dore shows in September. September 25th, we're in San Diego, and September 18th in Burbank, California. Get your tickets right there. There's a link right there.